So anyway, it turns out that 2014 there were 224. This year, Russell, first 6 months of this year, guess how many migrants pretended to be children? 1,317. That is more than the combined totals put together of 2017, 2018 and 2019. We've got an escalating problem here, and the problem is that our people, our Home Office people, do not spend much time checking into these people's stories. They just let them stay.
Well, of course, they don't really know who they are. I suppose if they're throwing their IDs over the side of the boat that they rock up on, well, then that would be the reason that we can't check them out. I spoke some time ago, actually, to our own Dr. Renee about this, and she was saying that in medical practice, there's a very, very simple way of trying to decide and determine how old somebody is, whether they are indeed 14 or if they're a proper adult, and that's to X-ray their wrists. Apparently, now I don't know any more technical detail than that, but I'm sure that if Dr. Renee is listening, or Dr. David Bull or somebody, they'll let us know if that is absolutely the case, as I understand it. So there is a very, very simple and straightforward and reliable way of determining whether these 21-year-olds are actually 14, as they say, and that might, I venture, Kev, stop 21-year-olds, many of whom are criminals, which is why presumably they don't want their identity to be revealed, being put in schools with my 15 and 16-year-old daughters.
Exactly right. Now, you know, one such case was a guy called Lawangin Abdul Rahimzai. He was an Afghan asylum seeker, pitched up here a couple of years ago, March 2021, I believe. He arrived here saying that he was a 14-year-old schoolboy. In fact, he was nearly 20, and it later transpired, not that the Home Office did any checking at all, but while he was in Serbia, he murdered 2 people. Then arrived here, and we put him into school. We put him into 2 Bournemouth schools. The first one he was expelled for carrying a knife, so we put him into another school. And sometime after that, March 22, he's in the Bournemouth town centre at night, and he killed, murdered, stabbed to death a poor guy called Thomas Roberts, a fine young man, a loving family man who was hoping to join the Marines. Now, this guy, Abdul Rahimzai, is now doing a lengthy sentence, but he breezed in saying, he clearly, you can look at him, he doesn't look anything like, came in and said, I'm 14. We said, OK, off you go to school. We've got to do something about this. It's ridiculous. We don't ask any questions. You know, as you implied earlier, Russell, you know, half of them turn up and they're terrorists. We don't find out.
But I don't know if you've heard of this recent invention, which is apparently you can fingerprint people. I don't know if you've heard of this. So you can take someone's fingerprints, which then later can identify them, both
there's a thought.
In terms of them, you know, leaving evidence, but also so you can identify who they are. Now, one would imagine that if someone in even Syria had murdered people and was punished for it, that their fingerprints would have been taken. Those fingerprints then, when someone rocks up anonymously on a small boat on the shores of Dover, you could take their fingerprints for 2 reasons. A, to see if they are a criminal somewhere else, but also so then we have a record of their fingerprints, so that if they do commit a crime, we know exactly who it was, rather than just releasing them anonymously onto the streets of Britain, or indeed into our schools, to commit further crimes. I mean, it's not rocket science, Kevin, this, is it?
That guy, there's this guy who said he was 14.
Yeah. I mean, he's all of 20, and that's obvious. Just looking at him.
So obvious, yeah, ridiculous. And of course, you know, here's a handy thing. This is what's happening. I mean, here's a handy thing. If a guy, not probably a woman, but if a guy arrives here saying, you know, I'm 14, and they're kind of greying around there, and they've got a receding hairline, then just maybe sort of treat their story with a little bit of circumspection and doubt. Maybe, you know, the fact that you're receding hairline and you've got grey hair, I'm not sure that I'm buying that you're 14 years old. What we're doing now is going, yeah, fair enough, boom, boom, go to school. It's ridiculous.
But it's indicative of the woke situation that we have found ourselves in, which, of course, long ago permeated most of our public sector, including Border Force and the Home Office, whereby they want to give everybody the fluffy benefit of the doubt, including people like this. Rather than thinking about the potential victims of these people, they think about them. They give them the benefit of the doubt, and then, shock horror, lo and behold, there are consequences, as you've just laid out, whereby a person that is not 14 but 21, old enough to murder 2 people, comes over here and does exactly the same thing again. I've said this before, our government really has one job, right? We elect a government for one job, which overall is the protection of the British public. Now, whether that's through the economy or the police and the judiciary and so on, I mean, not this government, of course, because they're not responsible for this particular perpetrator, as you've outlined, because they've only been in power for 11 or 12 weeks. But certainly the last government, and maybe the one before it, Tony Blair, that started all of this open door nonsense, frankly, they are criminally culpable, I think, in terms of what they have done to the fabric of this country. It is not just inappropriate, but it's actually sinister, it's reckless, and I think they should be taken to task criminally, these politicians, that they've allowed this country to be at the behest of this outrageous situation that we find ourselves in.
It's a disgrace, it's a scandal. This particular,
but no one's accountable.
This particular government, you know, they're not doing a damn thing. I was just talking to Jeremy Kyle, oh, well, they got to get rid of the Rwanda scheme, didn't work. Well, I mean, love Jeremy and all that, but you know,
he wasn't given a chance not to work.
How do you know the Rwanda scheme didn't work? It didn't start.
And now we're talking to the Albanians about doing the same thing in Albania, which is exactly the same in a different country as what we spent 500 million quid on thinking about Rwanda.
And by the way, why have the numbers of asylum seekers claiming to be children, why is that soared? Rocketed, absolutely rocketed. As I say, used to be low hundreds every year. This year, first 6 months, over 1,300, 1,300 in the first 6 months. Why is it rocketing? Because under the Rwanda scheme, you couldn't be deported to Kigali if you're a child.
Yeah, and
so there's another indication that the Rwanda scheme was having an effect. We already knew about all the migrants that were heading into Dublin in order to escape the EU so that they couldn't be deported. So it was, even the spectre of the Rwanda scheme was beginning to have an effect. If we'd have brought it into practice, who knows what could have happened? So don't tell me it didn't work or it was a bad idea. It never got the chance because that half-wit Prime Minister of ours came in on day one and said, hey, it's a gimmick, and got rid of £370 million worth of taxpayers' investment. Yeah, I mean, had a stroke.
Who knew that people with malintent would play the system, Kev? I mean, people have been doing it over hundreds and hundreds of years. So if you leave ambiguity, people will play the system. So whether it's so-called unaccompanied minors, even though they're actually 21, that's one thing. You remember the other scandal, which was people coming over here from wherever they were coming from, India, Syria, and so on, trying to claim asylum, but realising that actually they might not have a particularly strong case. So what they were then saying is that they had transferred to Christianity. So they're no longer Muslim, for instance. They've decided to become Christians.
Like football.
Yeah, whatever.
Signing him up.
Whatever the word you want to use.
£50 million deal.
Yes. So pretended to be Christian, shall we say, which then meant they couldn't be deported. Guess why? Because they would have been stoned to death in their own countries for being Christian.
Well, they say.
Well, but I'm just saying, we are allowing people to play the system. And the Home Office and Border Force are just sitting there, a bit like the RNLI. I mean, the RNLI, that are effectively the Channel migrant taxi service, they're all being played as mugs. And the trouble is, Kevin, we are the people that have to take the consequences of it.
You know what they do when they... the other thing is, of course, if you converted to Christianity and then you get, I don't know, deported to Syria or Somalia or somewhere like that where Christians aren't necessarily greeted with open arms, you could just say, you could just keep quiet about it, but no, you know what they always do? they get a tattoo on their arm to prove they're Christians, you know. I would say that's a nice tattoo, and thank you very much for converting to our religion, Christianity. I hope you like it, and give my regards to everyone in Somalia.
Here's your ticket.
When you get there, won't you? Because I don't really care. That would be my solution, but that's why I'm not the Prime Minister. Also, I pay for these clothes, so I'm obviously not right for the job. Next up, let's talk a bit more about Ms. Badenoch, shall we? I'm still with Russell Quirk. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan. This is the Political Asylum. Stay tuned.